strong. He called the case here a premeditated and continued deception by the leader of the free world. Nothing about the sentencing takes that away. It's worth remembering, whether sentenced or not, that is what the jury found he did, and the judge has said that. But the only other option for the judge was to put off the sentencing until 4 years from now, after Donald Trump is no longer president. And at that point, even the district attorney's office said jail would not be appropriate. So this is a really unusual situation. So it's hard to compare it to the other 30 cases that the New York Times looked at, because you would have had this 4-year hiatus.
Ever since Election Day, President Biden has been taking steps to safeguard his agenda, our institutions, and democracy more broadly from the assault on America that Donald Trump's presidency will be. And every time he does, as you'd expect, Donald Trump throws a tantrum. And his latest Truth Social tantrum was one of the worst. And it was over an action that President Biden took to safeguard a part of his environmental agenda that is clearly driving Trump crazy. But it's not just what President Biden has done has made Donald Trump so upset, but somehow what he hasn't done. And you'll understand that when we get into Trump's post in just a second. But before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video, and if you haven't already, and you enjoy our channel, to hit that subscribe button. It goes a long way, and it really means the world to me. Now, Donald Trump, as I've said, is throwing a tantrum right now, saying that President Biden is causing a greater disruption to the transition process ever before in American history. And of course, that's ridiculous, especially due dipo with what VP Harris said today.
Obviously a very important day, and it was about what should be the norm and what the American people should be able to take for granted, which is that one of the most important pillars of our democracy is that there will be a peaceful transfer of power. And today I did what I have done my entire career, which is take seriously the oath that I have taken many times to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, which included today performing my constitutional duties to ensure that the people of America, the voters of America, will have their votes counted, that those votes matter, and that they will determine then the outcome of an election. I do believe very strongly that America's democracy is only as strong as our willingness to fight for it.
So Donald Trump, the guy who led a violent attack on our Capitol and insurrection on January 6, 2021, is saying that President Biden and VP Harris, as we will see in his meltdown of a post, are stopping the smooth transition of power. They're stalling. They're getting in his way. When VP Harris, who Donald Trump has insisted had the power to make herself president on January 6th, she didn't do that. Joe Biden didn't get in the way. No, they've allowed for the smooth transition process, but because of actions that President Biden is taking to protect his agenda, he's somehow worse than a guy who incited an insurrection. What is wrong with Donald Trump? Obviously, a lot. And we know that. And we're going to see it in his complete meltdown of a post. But before we do, I want to get into the action that President Biden is taking in this article right here. President Biden is moving to ban new offshore oil and gas drilling in most U.S. coastal waterways, a last-minute effort to block possible action by the incoming Trump administration to expand offshore drilling. Biden, whose term expires in 2 weeks, said he is using authority under the federal Outer Continental Shelf Lands Act to protect offshore areas along the east and west coast, the Gulf of Mexico, and portions of Alaska's northern Bering Sea from future oil and natural gas leasing. My decision reflects what coastal communities, businesses, and beachgoers have known for a long time, that drilling off these coasts could cause irreversible damage to places we hold dear and is unnecessary to meet our nation's energy needs as the climate crisis continues to threaten communities across the country, and we are transitioning to a clean energy economy. Now is the time to protect these coasts for our children and grandchildren. Biden said, so all of that seems like pretty standard action from an outgoing president and of course doesn't violate the law like Donald Trump is about to insist. But I said earlier that it's not just this action that Donald Trump is upset about. He's upset about things President Biden hasn't done, or things that President Biden hasn't done that he thinks he has. You'll understand what I'm trying to say. When we get into this post right here, Trump wrote on Truth Social, Biden is doing everything possible to make the transition as difficult as possible, from lawfare such as never been seen before to costly and ridiculous executive orders on the green news scam and other money-wasting hoaxes. Fear. Not these orders will all be terminated shortly, and we will become a nation of common sense and strength. MAGA. So besides Donald Trump's inability to type and write real and complete sentences with grammatical structure, he also has it confused when he's saying that President Biden is somehow waging lawfare against him. Mind you, something that Donald Trump and his FBI director appointee and Kash Patel have actually promised to do. So Donald Trump is mad that Joe Biden is cutting back on offshore drilling gas leases because we don't need that energy as we move to more efficient and more profitable and better paying jobs in the clean energy sector. That's what Donald Trump's matter about, first of all. And then that President Biden is not using the federal government to go after him for cases that are being dismissed because prosecutors know Donald Trump will just give himself the immunity that the Supreme Court has promised him, that he'll pardon himself. And all the criminals around him, what is he actually upset about? The election was certified something Donald Trump insisted shouldn't be done in his instance, but is being done by President Biden. And of course, Vice President VP Harris Trump is just angry and lashing out. And this is what we're going to expect for the next 4 years, unfortunately. But there's also some lashing out because of what could continue with Donald Trump's own criminality. And I want to get an update from that Jen Psaki right here.
So this week, the judge overseeing Donald Trump's criminal fraud case in New York ordered the incoming president to be sentenced next Friday, January 10th, which, if you're doing the math, is just 10 days before he takes office. Now, in doing so, Judge Juan Merchan rejected Trump's combative last-ditch attempt to forego sentencing and dismiss the case altogether. Merchan said that presidential immunity does not extend to a president-elect who is not in office yet. But he also ruled out any sentence of incarceration. Instead, he suggested he will order an unconditional discharge. That is, Trump won't face jail or probation or any other punishment. And given the crime here, that would be pretty unusual under any other circumstance. In fact, the New York Times review of the 30 felony false records convictions in Manhattan since 2014 revealed that no other defendant received an unconditional discharge. They instead received jail and prison sentences, probation, conditional discharges, community service, or fines. Andrew Weissman is the former general counsel at the FBI. Neil Katyal is the former acting U.S. Solicitor General. I think you know them both. I don't know why we have to keep introducing all of the things because you know them both, but here we are. Okay, Neil, let me start with you. I think obviously this was a strongly worded from Judge Merchan. But for anyone out there who's not a lawyer and who's wondering, what is the point of having a sentencing hearing but not punishing him at all? What is the point?
Yeah, so it's strongly worded, Jen, in two different senses. In one, the first part, Judge Merchan really says, look, Trump violated the law, had felony convictions. This jury, this guilty verdict wasn't handed down by operatives or elites or anything like that. It was a jury of 12 of Donald Trump's peers who listened, they deliberated, and affirmed the enduring principle that no one is above the law. So that's part one of the decision. The judge says, I'm not going to overturn this conviction. The jury rendered it in a fair and impartial way. Part two, about the sentencing, the judge says, but I'm likely to give what he calls an unconditional discharge, which, as you say, means no jail time. It's still important because it's still a felony conviction, and Donald Trump almost certainly is going to appeal it in any number of ways. But right now, Donald Trump stands as a convicted felon, and sometimes you do have felons who don't serve jail time. It's a really rare, as that New York Times study that you pointed out says, but it is possible.
All right, Andrew, I'm just trying to kind of help explain to all of our viewers here, no one better than you two. Is there anything the judge could have done differently to change where we are clearly arriving at on Friday, or not?
That is a great question because it gets at the dilemma that the judge had. Because the only other real choice, absent giving Donald Trump what he wanted, which is an outright dismissal of the case, and the judge rejected that. And as Neil said, the language, and as you point out, was very strong. He called the case here a premeditated and continued deception by the leader of the free world. Nothing about the sentencing takes that away. It's worth remembering, whether sentenced or not. That is what the jury found he did, and the judge has said that. But the only other option for the judge was to put off the sentencing until 4 years from now, after Donald Trump is no longer president. And at that point, even the district attorney's office said jail would not be appropriate. So this is a really unusual situation. So it's hard to compare it to the other 30 cases that the New York Times looked at, because you would have had this 4-year hiatus. And the final thing that's sort of important to note is by sentencing Donald Trump this Friday, he actually will trigger Donald Trump's appellate rights. Because if this was waiting for 4 years, the normal rules are that Donald Trump would have this hanging over his head for his entire presidency. So, in many ways, this was a really Solomonic decision. It gives finality to the district court's, the trial court's ruling here. And it sends a message about this case to the public.
We've talked about this a couple of times on the show already, and it is very much the case for the business community and a lot of corporate news outlets that are already starting to bend the knee to Donald Trump, anticipating in advance that they're going to be going after him and buddying up anyways. And what happens to any person who ever joins the Trump cult? They get kicked out on their butt every single time. There is no one who has made their allegiance to Trump who has come out unscathed. And ABC News is the latest perfect and sad example, ponying up to Donald Trump, well, for his FTC chair to say, well, actually, we still are going to go after you, unable to buy any goodwill with Donald Trump because he doesn't care. And that's why I do not want to see prosecutors stop going after Donald Trump for his criminality. Sure, he's going to pardon himself. Sure, he thinks he has immunity. Sure, the Supreme Court says he has immunity, but there's no reason why we shouldn't actively work to hold Donald Trump accountable for the crimes he committed. He's going to try to hold Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger and Jack Smith accountable for crimes they didn't commit, so we shouldn't let the scale of justice tilt towards Trump. It's actually continue to work to hold him accountable. And that's what we're going to be doing, of course, on this show every single day. And if you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button. You can leave a like on this video. And if you're stuck around at the end, you can drop a blue heart in the comments. And until next time, I'll see you soon.